Hey, it's Mack with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and it's Thursday. It's June the 12th. This will be our chart lesson for today. And finally, we got some nice movement, and it wasn't to the upside, unbelievably. Uh, the market's been overdue for a correction, and we're getting it today. And we got a little of it yesterday as well. Uh, Not nearly with a conviction that we're having to sell off today, but all the same, we're getting a correction today. And Um, this is the channel I see in the end. I had it a little bit different earlier on in the day. Earlier, I had it right off of here and maybe just a little bit steeper than that. And but as the price, as the day goes on, a lot of times you get more price action. You can, I mean, it's real obvious now that it's off those first two swings. But when we couldn't get back there earlier, I thought it was maybe off of these swings here, and that we just had that little overshoot that you'll sometimes get in the overnight, but I was wrong about that. So still got you to the same place, and particularly if you draw your short-term uh, trend lines, they all worked, beautifully for the most part. You get your break, your move to a new low or new high. This was the only one that couldn't, that you got a break of that couldn't make a new high, but it's obvious why it didn't make a new high because after you got these first two, and you confirm this here, that's just a pull back to the trend line for the most part. It fooled a lot of people, most likely. Everybody looking for that reversal pattern again, and look what happened. And it's really struggled to go lower through here, but there's a lot of selling going on, so somebody was dumping some stuff. So, but let's talk about the trades that I saw, and you had to be patient today. I mean, once they start setting up, they come fairly regularly. But somebody actually sent me an email and they said, how do you trade this? All the setups are off the low of the bottom. Well, there's not many that are close to the bottom you really want to take. There's a couple of them in here later on, but by this time, it's real obvious that the market is selling off, and so by this time, you're not too worried about selling the low of the day. Obviously, you want to see a trap of some kind, or first. Um, but on a downtrend day like this, you're not as worried about selling the low of the day. It's on range days that you can't sell the low and you can't buy the high or buy the high. You got to be really careful about that. But when you get a runaway trend like this, most of your really good setups are going to come off of the trend lines or the EMA. And in this case, we've got short-term trend lines, major trend lines, and even a major midline through here. So that's where to look for all your setups. And yeah, sometimes you're only going to get one shot at it. But if you look at this one, you got a second entry short. You look at this one, this is actually a second entry short here. I marked this one in green because it wasn't obvious that this was a trend line yet. But if you look, you got one leg up, pull back, and a second leg up, and each of those two legs has two legs within it, and that's pretty common. And you don't really get a really good setup bar either. So this one was a little bit surprising. I think it was a little aggressive selling there, but I don't think there was any reason to, for an aggressive trader not to maybe take that trade either. This was the better trade and the one that made more sense. And you don't know it's going to rocket off like that. And then you get a little trap here. There was actually a failed second entry long there, but that's so close to those lows, and I just, that one's a little bit dangerous, but there is a trap. I almost circled that one in green, but I said no, it's better to wait, because then you get the failed second entry long off the low, and you with a nice reversal bar there, so then you got people trapped, and off it goes, and then you got this trend line working down. It looks like there was probably either we really overshot it here, or there were two tiers to it. So um, you don't get a close outside till here, and we're trying to make a retest, and we didn't quite get there yet. Wouldn't surprise me if we don't keep going lower and test it, but then again, it wouldn't surprise me if we don't reverse and come back up. We do have a close outside the trend line here, or the trend channel, so, but a close that minor outside on a day like this, we could just keep going lower. So, who knows? Uh, but it was really obvious by this time that, hey, this is a strong sell-off. And what I would be looking for is a measured move, much like that. So if we're going to get a measured move, we're going down to about 1925 or so. So we'll see what happens. Uh, but, you know, if I had some runners and they hadn't gotten stopped out yet, that's what I'd probably be hanging on for, to see if we could get to 1925. But let's talk about the trades and what I saw, and we'll go from there. And again, just remember that even if you don't have the bigger channel just exactly right, you still got the shorter term channels, and just about every one of them had a break and a new low. You got a break and a retest with a new low. You got on this correction, you got a break and a retest with a new high. Then you're moving down, you got a break with two legs down to a new low, and guess where it bounces? Right off that. Once you hit this other side, there's a good chance you're probably going to the other side. So that's why I'd be really careful right here, because now there's a good chance we could come to the other side before we maybe try to go lower again. And then you got this channel working up. It's like it's a little two-tiered channel. You get the break and attempt to get a retest, but they just couldn't overcome the major channel trend line right there, and you get a second entry short counting off that high right there, right at the trend line, and there it goes. And then you try to go higher twice, fails, goes lower, then you get a little pull back to the midline. That's, you know, generally once you come through, that's what I would wait on. This looked a little like one pulling back, so, you know, it was tempting to go short right there, but I think you were better off to wait on this one. You can see once that happened, they really fooled everybody, and it took off. And anybody that saw the channel knew where we were headed, down to the lower side. Just hang on till you get there. Same thing here. Just hang on till you get to the other side. You didn't have a whole lot of confirmation of the lower side until this got here, really. But now that you've got, you know, several touches there, just wait and look for it to, you know, bounce at that same place again. And once you hit the lower side, there's a good chance that you're going to the higher side. And you notice we didn't quite get there here. I actually pulled it up to that, but then you get some overshoots, which we could have overshot it, but I'm guessing that the reason we kept going lower here is because we didn't quite get to the lower side right there. We didn't quite touch it. It tried to correct, and then we went down again. But the way I originally had it drawn, I didn't have the shorter term ones on here, but I had it drawn more like that right there, and but we didn't touch here, so that kind of had me thrown off. But I'm thinking, well, the market's just too weak, and we're not able to get above that EMA. But looking back on it now, I think that I just had the channel off a little bit, and it was really right off the first two swings like it normally is. Sometimes it's, you know, you just didn't have enough price action at that point to prove that point, but now it's obvious. So, but that's why it helps to draw your shorter term ones, trend channels as well, because that'll help keep you on the right side and keep you from entering too early or too late or whatever. So, but let's talk about the trades. The first trade I saw was right here. Even though on a bigger picture, this is a failed second entry long. Notice the pull back here, first entry, pull back secondary. There's a couple little juts up right in there. And there was a second entry long right here, but that was like 2 in the morning or something. That was, I mean, it didn't much happen in the overnight. I mean, that's like 2:50 my time, Central Time. So, you know, we didn't really start moving until right here, right around the 7 o'clock. And that's pretty common. Sometimes you'll get more price action than that before 7, but that's fairly common for, you know, the market to start picking up around 6:30 to 7 o'clock, between 6 and 7, my, you know, Central Standard Time. So that's pretty standard. But you get that failed second entry long there on a bigger picture. It's similar to a break. You know, it's close enough to be in a breakout pullback short. So several different reasons to go short. It's not a perfect signal bar either, but it is a trap. So you might have wanted to use a limit order here, but I don't think you'd have got filled because it's a trap, and as soon as it broke lower, everybody started exiting. And if it would have broke higher here before turning down, that would have been an interesting one to think about as well, but it never did. And then you get a little two-legged correction. Um, this one I had marked green because there's just not much of a correction right there. Looking at it after the fact now that we got some more price action and I got my channel right, if I'd had this channel right, I would have made that one red. But I don't think you had enough price action at that point. This, this was not. We still had, even though this is a new low for the day, this is kind of the overnight low right here, basically. And it's not far from that low right there. So there's a good chance that, you get caught short, going short right here, and it reverses on you. So, but it was the first break of the trend line, but there's not a lot of room back to that low. So, unless you found the original channel, which looking back at it, it really wasn't that hard to see. I just was probably looking too hard because it was right off the first two swings, and that fits perfectly right across there where we bounced and so forth. So, but if you saw that, that could be this is like really close to being marking this red, but because of the way I saw it early, I think you have to draw it green based on the way I was seeing it. So that's the way I did it. It is a two-legged correction. It's a second entry short. It's coming right off for the most part, the EMA. It's right off the midline. But again, and it is the first break of that trend channel, that little tight channel coming down right there. And you can see it was an easy trade, but again, it's so close to these lows, and guess what? We bounced right there, pulled back, and this one I drew green as well. It's a second entry short off the EMA, but you don't have a lot of room to scalp out. The only way you could enter this would be if you got in with a limit order, a tick or two back in it. And I don't know if you'd have got filled on that, and it would have bounced. And notice it turns up, and it goes back and makes a new high now. So now you've got a close outside and a new high. So I really like that setup right there. It took it a minute to get going, but then it tries to go higher again, so you get a second entry short right there. And this one broke out the upper side first and then turned down, so you just have a stop waiting right there. And when it breaks lower, you might even use a limit order because it's breaking below a doji. But the fact that it went higher first and then turned down, and it made a lower high, and you already had your break and your new high, I think that one's okay to make it red. And of course, you got your trend line right there, and it never closes outside, and it goes straight to the other side of that little trend channel. And then you come up, and you do get a close outside of it this time. But this is a failed second entry long. That's a new high. Look at that. Pull back first entry, pull back second entry. So they've got the longs trapped again, and that thing turns down. And once it breaks lower, look at it go again. Boom. That's because it's a trap. It was really tempting to say enter right here, but I just don't think you can enter short right there at the very lows of the day with all those matching lows, because there's a good chance it breaks lower, comes back, and then tries to go down. And that's what I was hoping would happen, but it just dropped straight on down. And then it bounces. And that's when I started looking a little closer at my channel to see if my channel, because that didn't quite fit my channel the way I had it drawn. And I drew this one as a possible long. And the only reason is because you've got this channel coming down, you get the break, I moved to a new low. And at that point, I saw this as basically a measured move too, off of that right there. And we weren't quite there, but we were coming off what I had as the lower trend channel. Actually, it would have been a little overshoot because originally I had this a little bit higher. And so it would have been an overshoot on my channel already. So, and this was real close. So I just didn't see any way. Actually, we're back to here then. So we're bouncing off, and it looked like an overshoot, but you get a failed second entry short there, and you've got the break of this little channel coming down and a move to a new high. And so based on that trap and that real bullish, oops, didn't mean to do that, and that very bullish bar going there, your aggressive traders are probably going to go long there. And what you're looking for is a pullback to test this breakout area that's across here. And I don't have a line on there, but let's just put it there, because that is very common and pretty much what you're expecting to happen. Sometimes on a real strong trend day, though, that you don't get those pullbacks. Oh, the line just doesn't look right there. There we go. And it breaks through, comes back, and then retests it again right there. And but there's a this is like, notice this, you got one leg up with two swings in it, and then you get a second leg up, and it's got two swings, but really your two legs are, there's the first move, then your little pullback, and then there's your second. So you've got your two legs. So this is like a little failed break higher that traps people. So for that reason, and if you pulled your line up and saw that that was right off your upper two swings, you may want to go short right there. But I didn't like it specifically because we didn't have a break of this trend line yet, which didn't come to here. But sometimes you know, if the bigger trend is too strong, you're not going to get the retest. And when it started going lower here, I was really surprised when it came all the way back up again. But it's really given another test of that resistance just to prove its support, because we kind of got through right there. And remember how we determined this, when it couldn't go higher right there above that previous support, now it's acting as resistance, and that's a second entry short counting off this high, and there's only one leg down, so you're probably going to get another leg very similar. And of course we get a much bigger leg that goes all the way and right through that, pulls back, you get a first entry short off that low, pull back, second entry, and it broke higher first and then went out the low side. So I liked going short right there, because now you're figuring, hey, we're headed to the other side of this channel again. And I actually, when we made this little double bottom here, I needed one more tick, actually two probably, to get filled on limit order. So I almost exited when this bar closed inside on my trade that I took from right there. And just as I was about to pull the trigger, it broke through and filled my trade. So if it would have taken 30 more seconds, I probably would have exited that and wouldn't have had any runners moving down here. So that turned out to be a really good trade. And yeah, it's, you know, you're getting short a tick or two off the low of the day, but you got to understand why, because there's a trend down. We're looking for prices to move to a new low. We're looking for a trap to the long side. You're just looking for, this is basically a double bottom right below the EMA. It's a failed second entry long. It's a second entry short with a little trap. You got people trying to buy the low of the day, and that's what happens. And that's what I've been warning you about. You know, you got to be real careful buying those lows of the day, and what they'll do is they'll reverse that over and over and over and over until even the weakest traders are aware of it. And so then they all start trying to buy one day on a nice trend like this, and they get fooled right there, and off it goes. And so you got to be careful. You got to understand what the bigger picture looks like and what's going on, and you got to be able to understand that this is a downtrend day, not a range day. Once we went through here and came back and tested a couple times and went lower, there's no doubt it's a trend day, and it's been a pretty good trend day. But I like that entry, and then you get the you come back and test the midline right here and turn back down, and now you know you're probably headed to this side for sure, and off it goes. And we already talked about this. When you get a two-legged back pull back to the EMA, back to the trend line or the midline and the EMA, it's a second entry short, and it's a real low risk because of the small doji, and it's the first break of this channel working down, so you're probably going to get a retest attempt, and you got one, and now you haven't got a new low yet, so it's still trying to go lower. And that was pretty much what I saw today. And it was a really good trading day. And just remember, again, to the person that sent me the question about, you know, how do you enter on days like this? Well, you know, if it's a strong trend, you may not get second entries off the trend line either. You got to remember that. Most of the times you will. Even here you got one. It was a little less, you know, it was harder to understand that because it was a pretty good move, kind of unexpectedly, then a pretty good move up. But there's just a lot of selling, and I think it fooled a lot of people. Then it comes back and turns back down again. And this thing still doesn't look. It's not. That's why it doesn't look right. There. And that one's right. Drives me nuts when it doesn't look right. But anyway, and you can see that was a perfect touch of that previous kind of support right across there. Comes back and touches it to the tick and then turns down. But the most important thing is that trend line working down through there. So there's multiple reasons to like many of these trades. And this is actually almost, this little short right here is almost a repeat pattern of that one right there. So based on that, looking back at that, noticing that it's a repeat pattern, I'm going to go ahead and make that one red right there too. You had to, because notice the new high, pullback first entry, pullback. It's a failed second entry long. It's a breakout pullback short, and it's almost a perfect repeat pattern of that right there. And actually the setup bar is a little bit better, even though it's got a tad of green. That could have easily closed to the low side, and on some of these chart it may have closed to the low side. But it's a breakout pullback short. It's a failed second entry long. So it's a trap. Prices did shoot through the midline there, so there's a good chance you're going to break on through. And so there's a lot of reasons that, looking back on it now, I even like that trade. It wasn't quite as easy to see in real time, maybe, but and I went back and forth whether I was going to mark it green, but then I decided not to. But looking at it again, kind of after the fact, I think that it's almost all right to make that red, since it's kind of a repeat pattern. And that's really it for today. And you can see we're still trying to make that new low. I'll be surprised if we don't. But each time we get to these strong supports, it really struggles to get through, just like it did right here. It took a little work, and like I said, I almost exited before I got my scalp on that trade. And if it had taken just a little bit longer, I probably would have exited, and with only one tick on that trade. So I'm glad I hung on in the end, because then you were able to ride these runners on down. So, but anyway, that's what I saw today, and I hope that makes sense. On a strong trend day, and that works to the upside as well. If the market's trending upward strongly like this, you're not as worried about buying closer to the highs. It's when it's been rangy looking, or a range day like this right here, you don't want to buy near the highs, because look what happens every time it makes a new high. Even though it's going higher at this point, it still sells off every time it makes a new high. And every time it makes a new low, it kind of goes higher. So you got to be able to distinguish between the two types of days. And just remember that it takes a while to learn this stuff. So if you've been trading for a few weeks, or a few months, or even for a year or two, if you've been doing what we're doing for a year or two, you should be starting to get it by now. But if just because you've been trading a couple of years, if you've only been on price action for a few months or a year, that's not very long. Trust me, that's not very long to learn to understand prices, unless you're exceptional at it, or if you already had kind of an understanding and didn't really realize it. Because that's my theory. I believe that anybody that day trades, that consistently makes money as a day trader, even if they don't say they're price action traders and they don't call themselves price action traders, they have still learned to be able to read the chart. Otherwise, because indicators don't work. I don't care what anybody tells you. Yeah, they'll work occasionally, but in the end, you can't make money with indicators. And if you attempt to make money with indicators, you're probably going to be a loser. So again, it's just my theory, but I believe it strongly that if people are making money as a day trader, they can read this chart. They have a good understanding of prices, even if they don't realize it. It's subconscious, whatever. And one other thing I'm going to say, and then I'm going to wrap this up, and is that people try to make logic out of price action, logic out of the markets, and the markets are not logical. That's why they're so hard, because it doesn't matter how much common sense you've got, it doesn't matter how intelligent you are. Everything works almost backwards. And you've probably heard some traders that have traded for a while and lose, and they start saying, okay, I tell you what I'm going to do. If I think I should buy, I'm going to sell. And if I think I should sell, I'm going to buy. And they start doing that, and suddenly they're making money. But they're doing everything backwards. And that's because what seems logical is to wait and sell way down here once you've got proof that the market's going lower. But by then, it's too late. The smarter traders all realized it way up here. They realized that it was a sell up here. And by the time the most weaker traders or losing traders are figuring it out is when it's way down here and they see it go through right here and then it stalls again and they say, okay, I'm not going to watch it go by again, and they get short right there. And that's what you call selling the low, the low. And even though, and that's another thing that you can see, you had to ride this out, but you can make mistakes on a trend day as long as you're getting on with the trend and still make money. But if you make mistakes on a range day, selling the lows or buying the highs, you don't ever get a chance to make it back. Now if you bought right here, you're in a world of hurt if you're hanging on, because it's still going lower. Now we finally got a new low here. And you can see the little trend line rules playing out perfectly all the way up and down through here. And so I hope all that makes sense. But this is not easy to learn. It's a skill. It truly is a skill. And like any skill, you get better at it as you continue to practice and hone and work on your skill. And I've said this a million times, and I'm going to say this again as well, and then I'm wrapping this up. But trading itself does not make you a better trader. This is just an opinion of mine based on my experience with the markets, is that trading doesn't make you better. What makes you better is getting on the simulator and trading, follow the rules, trade, try to take the right trades based on what we teach, and don't worry if you're wrong or right. Put your stop if you're going short here, put your stop above the signal bar, have your scalp where it goes, and if you're going to use a runners, move your runner to break even after you scalp out. And just let every trade trigger, and then let every trade play out, either be right or wrong. Don't move your stop because you think you're wrong or you think you're right, or just be wrong or right, and then study those trades. When you worry about whether you were wrong or right, is at the end of the day, you go study your trades and you study your chart and you study your work, and you figure out, okay, if you went short here, what did you miss? What was the wrong? Why this second entry didn't work, and most of these others did? And why I was going long here? Why did it not work? If you went long here, why were you wrong? If you went long right up here, why were you wrong? If you went short right here, why were you right? There's an answer to all of them, and it's all in the price action. And if you went short right here, you got trapped because the market had moved as far as it could go and touched the trend channel line, and now it's working to the other side. And what happens when it gets there? Then it starts selling off again. And you can see this thing's still going lower. And it's a strong trend day, and you don't argue with strong trend days. Just follow the rules, take the trades as they set up, and either be wrong or right, and then spend the time studying those trades, because that's how you get better. Coming in here and trading, and then at the end of the day, you don't even know why you had losers, why you had winners. You're never going to learn anything. you're never going to get there at that route, going that route. The way you're going to get there is to take the trades and then spend as much or more time studying that chart and those trades and those setups at the end of the day, figuring out why you were right and what was going on and why you were wrong and what you don't want to do again next time. So hope that's clear. But I'm going to wrap this thing up. Um, we'll be back to do it again tomorrow. Then just a reminder that I'm going to be on vacation next week. So uh, at least through Thursday, probably no chart lesson. If I get, depending on when I come back, may trade one day, but I'll probably take the whole week off. So, but I'm going to wrap it up for today. This is Mack with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and we'll see you next time.